Casio recently released the G-Shock GW-BX5600, and it just might be the greatest watch ever made. Let me tell you why, but first take a look at it. Hey guys, this is Dave. Welcome back to my channel, Just the Watch, where I like to talk about affordable watches, whatever that means these days. As always, I'm recording from my home in Iwate, Japan. And today we're talking about a watch from everybody's favorite Japanese brand, Casio. Now you just got to look at it in the intro, and for a lot of you are probably thinking, well, yeah, it's just a G-Shock. It looks like the G-Shock that Casio's been making forever. And it does, and that's part of the point. The new feature that everyone's really going crazy for here is the display. Casio's digital watches have historically been made with an LCD or liquid crystal display, but in the last couple years, they started introducing a new display technology in their watches called MIP, or memory in pixel. Now, in some ways, this new screen technology is an incremental improvement. It's not particularly revolutionary, but when you add it to this watch with all the other features that are packed into it, I think you can make the case that this is a new benchmark, a new standard for the ultimate watch. If you strip down exactly what a watch is supposed to be, it should be an accurate time-telling device that is in a very vulnerable position on your wrist. So it's something that needs to be durable. It's something that needs to be easily legible. It's something that should provide you with useful functionality related to timekeeping. So not only being able to tell you the time, but also helping you keep track of elapsed time or reminders and alarms, and telling you the time in other time zones. These are all functions related to a watch that we want to have. It's something that should be low maintenance and hassle-free, something that should just work. And it should be something that you can actually afford. And if you look at all these factors together, I think you can make the strong case that this watch is the best watch that's ever been built so far. Now, previously, I've put forward the Casio Royale or the AE1200 as the best watch ever made. And so I want to run some comparisons to see how this watch stacks up against that previous one. We're going to run through the same criteria. But this is a newly released watch, and there's still a lot of questions kind of circulating around it. So I want to clear up a few things first. So we're going to go through a couple of topics in this review. But let's start with this MIP display, because that is the biggest selling point of this watch, the biggest new feature, and the big benefit to this display. The reason why people are making such a big deal about it is because it has a better viewing angle than previous LCD displays that Casio has been putting out. Casio has been making digital watches with LCD displays for something like 40 years now, and the technology hasn't really changed much in that time. And there's a reason for that. LCD displays work really well. They're cheap, they're easy to read. Crucially, they don't consume much power, and it's because of these reasons that they make an excellent choice for a watch display. But they do have two drawbacks. One is that LCD displays have optimal viewing angles, so from certain angles you'll get a lot of contrast, and other angles they'll look a little bit faded. And for whatever reason, it seems like in recent years Casio's LCDs have kind of gotten worse in this regard, or maybe people have just gotten more picky. I'm not sure what it is, but there's been a lot of complaints about the viewing angles on the modern LCDs that Casio uses, with people complaining that they fade when you view them from straight on. I've tested this myself, and I did find that to be a problem. By contrast, the MIP display in this new G-Shock looks fantastic from all viewing angles. It doesn't have quite the same contrast as an e-ink display, but it's kind of similar. It's closer to that than an LCD. Being able to clearly see the display on a watch is extremely important to the functionality of a watch, and so the upgraded legibility is a clear improvement. The other advantage that an MIP display has is that it's pixel-based, which means that it can display a lot more information than an LCD. An LCD essentially has cutouts that allow certain areas to look black or not black, which led to the creation of the classic digital segmented number display that's used on all LCD watches. We're all used to that by now, but it's not really the most legible way to display numbers. But an MIP display is more analogous to a computer screen where it can display pretty much any kind of information. It essentially has a grid of small dots that can be turned on or off. This means that numbers can have actual curves and serifs, but it can also display pretty much anything, including words that help you navigate the functions of the watch. One thing that is very important to note is that you can't really see the pixels from a normal viewing distance. On a lot of these close-up shots, you can clearly see this kind of grid-like pattern across the display that doesn't look that great, but that's really only something you have to worry about if you're going to be posting a lot of close-up Instagram pics. Unless you have incredibly sharp eyes, you're not going to notice the individual pixels or that grid-like pattern that you see in the macros. Now, it seems that there are a lot of people that are nostalgic for the old segmented number display that's found on all classic G-Shocks. And so out of the box, Casio ships this watch with that font being used to display the numbers. But it is, in this case, just a font. It can be changed because this is a pixel-based display. Personally, I find that a little bit amusing. This is a newer display that does allow for a more legible typeface to be used, and so I want to take advantage of that. And so I appreciate that Casio gives you two different fonts to choose from, even though in order to do so, you have to connect it to your phone via Bluetooth, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, as great as the MIP display is, there are two drawbacks, two ways that LCD displays are superior. One is that LCD displays have a higher refresh rate. This means that they're able to display milliseconds in real time. But if you use the stopwatch on the GW-BX5600, you'll note that it only displays in real time the seconds counting. However, it is still tracking the hundredths of a second. And it will display the hundredths of a second when you stop the stopwatch. I don't think that that really decreases the functionality at all, but I do think an LCD display looks really cool when you see those hundredths of a second really flying around. And on some LCD displays, you have these really fast kind of animations that play. You're not going to get that on this MIP display. The other drawback is that the backlight is pretty weak, and as I understand it, this is also a trade-off that MIP displays have. Due to the way that an MIP display reflects light, it's much more difficult to light them from inside the watch than it is with a watch that has an LCD display. And as I understand it, that's the main reason for the somewhat anemic backlight on this watch. And this is a notable trade-off. You're going to get excellent legibility in well-lit situations, particularly in bright sunlight. This MIP display features much better contrast and better viewing angles than on an LCD-based G-Shock, but you're going to get inferior after-dark performance when using the backlight. And I don't know if there's anything Casio can really do about that. What I do know is that this is the dimmest backlight I've seen on any G-Shock watch, and this is particularly jarring considering that in recent years Casio has been including an upgraded, extremely bright LED backlight on their recent LCD G-Shocks. The LED is so bright you can essentially use it as a flashlight in the dark. By contrast, the LED light here is very dim, to the point that in some situations it even hinders legibility. Now, if you've been in the dark for a while and your eyes have adjusted to the low light conditions, the backlight here is plenty bright enough to allow for easy legibility. But if you've recently moved from a well-lit room into a dark hallway or walked outside, in those situations, I found that while it's possible to read the watch, it is pretty difficult. The light really isn't ideal for those situations. It's not terrible, it's still miles better than the unusable backlight on the F91W, but for a G-Shock, it's surprisingly bad, and it does hinder usability in real-world situations. Next, let's go over some basic comparisons to two previous G-Shock squares that this watch kind of competes with, starting with the DW5600. The DW5600 is the base model G-Shock square. It's the one that most people are familiar with. But the GW-BX5600 obviously has a lot more technology packed into it. In addition to the MIP display, it has Multiband 6, allowing it to sync over the radio with atomic time if you have one of those radio towers in your region. And if you don't, it has Bluetooth connectivity, allowing you to sync atomic time with your phone. And the watch itself has additional functions, including world time and 5 alarms instead of just 1. Where things do get a little bit interesting is the size. The GW-BX5600 is about 1 millimeter larger in all dimensions than the DW5600, with the exception of thickness, which is basically identical. When you look at the two watches side by side, it also appears that the screen on the GW-BX5600 is slightly larger, and the numbers displaying the time are noticeably larger, making this an easier watch to read. Now, one upgrade that this watch has over the DW5600 and a lot of classic G-Shock squares is that the adjust button is much easier to operate. On older G-Shock squares, the adjust button is intentionally difficult to access so that you don't accidentally press it. And that's actually pretty annoying because you do wind up using that button to access a lot of the functions on the watch. On the GW-BX5600, the adjust button is just as easy to access as any of the other buttons, but in order to enter the adjusting mode, you have to hold the button down for a few seconds. And this is a function that is aided by that MIP display, because doing so will change the display to tell you hold, letting you know that the watch has registered your button press and you just need to hold it down for a little bit longer. For me, this is a much more elegant solution than just making the adjust button almost impossible to press on its own. Probably a closer comparison is going to be with the GW-M5610. This is an older, more affordable model that has all of the exact same features except for the MIP display and the Bluetooth connection. So it has Multiband 6, it's got tough solar, it's got the world time and the 5 alarms, but it doesn't have that newer display, and if you don't live in a region where the atomic radio towers are available, you won't be able to sync the watch with atomic time, whereas the GW-BX5600 includes Bluetooth as a bonus, allowing people in those regions to have access to that feature. There was, however, one feature that wasn't carried over from the GW-M5610, and that's the upgraded caseback. The GW-M5610 has a much nicer looking, more solid brushed caseback that just looks more premium, whereas the caseback on the GW-BX5600 looks essentially identical to the base model DW5600. Moving on, let's talk about this Bluetooth feature a little bit more, because this is one of the upgrades over the GW-M5610, and I've seen some divided opinions on this. There are people who don't want their watches to have anything to do with their phones, and in some ways I fall into this camp as well. One of the reasons that I started wearing a watch was to get away from my phone more. I didn't want something feeding me more notifications on the wrist. I didn't want to have to take my phone out of my pocket to check the time. I wanted a watch that would function as a watch, and that's it. So I get why having Bluetooth connectivity might worry some people. But if you're in this camp, rest assured that this watch will function completely fine without ever connecting it to your phone or downloading an app. This is a fully self-sufficient time-telling device. The only reason I can think of that you would ever have to connect this to your phone or to the Casio app is to change the main font on the display. And so I think it's kind of funny that they lock you into that retro font unless you connect it to the phone. It feels like they really know their customers, and they figured, look, if they don't want to connect it to their phone, they're going to want the retro display. Now, all that said, I actually really like the way Casio has implemented this Bluetooth connection. I like that it is completely optional. In order to use it, you do have to install an app on your phone and go through a little bit of a setup process, but you can do that once, change a few functions, use it when you need to, and then completely forget about it. Your watch will just keep working as normal. And there are a few genuinely useful features here. It is a little bit of a pain setting alarms on a digital watch using just 4 little buttons, especially if you want to set multiple alarms, and this watch allows you to set up to 5. There were a number of times where I felt like it was easier just to go ahead and connect to the app and set the alarms that way rather than try and do it on the watch. Once the app has been downloaded and the initial setup is done, it's very easy to connect the watch to the phone simply by holding down the mode button. You can also set your world time and your home time on the phone very quickly and easily, which is a nice feature if you're traveling. And if you're someone who happens to misplace their phone a lot like me, you can set it up so that pressing a button on the watch will cause your phone to sound an alarm if it's within Bluetooth range, allowing you to figure out where it's at. Even though that's a step away from time telling, it is a genuinely useful thing, and I kind of like that the watch has that feature. I've used it a few times. All right, we covered a lot of ground already, but let's finally get to answering the question that we set out to answer in the beginning. Is this the greatest watch of all time? And remember, we're defining greatest watch of all time from a functionality perspective, from the standpoint of whether this functions as a watch better than any other watch that's been produced. Arguably, any watch that insists on sticking with a mechanical or automatic movement has abandoned the primary mission of a watch. They're no longer prioritizing creating the best time-telling instrument possible. Instead, they're selling nostalgia, craftsmanship, and aesthetic beauty. So here's the categories that really matter if you're looking for a good time-telling instrument on your wrist. Accuracy, durability, legibility, functionality, comfort and convenience, and accessibility. Let's start with accuracy. And this is arguably as accurate as you can possibly make a wristwatch. Not only does it feature a quartz movement, which is far more accurate than any mechanical movement, but it also features 2 methods of syncing with atomic time. And particularly if you live within range of the Multiband 6 system, the watch will update itself with atomic time every evening, ensuring that it is essentially always in sync with the most accurate clocks in the entire world. And as a backup, it has Bluetooth, allowing you to sync with atomic time anywhere in the world where you have a cell connection. The only thing that could conceivably top this is satellite synchronization via GPS, which Seiko does include on a lot of their Astron models. but those start at many times the price of this watch from Casio. The next category is durability. A watch is in a particularly vulnerable spot being on your wrist, especially for those who are commonly involved in active situations or work near or in water. Having a watch that won't just give up and break at the slightest bump is very important. And given that this is a G-Shock, once again, we're in elite territory here. This is one of the most durable watches in existence. The next category is legibility. A good wristwatch needs to be easy and quick to read. It needs to be able to cleanly and clearly display all of the information that you need to access. And this is an area that digital watches in general excel at. Analog watches, the more functions and complications you add, the more cluttered a dial tends to get, and it makes it more difficult to read them. Digital watches with their large displays and the ability to display different functions on different screens gets around this problem, making them among the most legible watches that are in existence. And since the GW-BX5600 improves on older LCD displays, this actually increases its legibility, pushing it ahead of most other digital watches, once again making it among the most legible watches in the entire world. Unfortunately, we do have to put a little bit of an asterisk here because of that backlight issue. Because of the dimmer backlight, this watch suffers when it comes to legibility after dark, which does leave a situation where many other watches surpass it. Looking at these first three categories, I think the watch is doing extremely well and is even ahead of the Casio Royale, the AE1200, that I previously considered as the best watch ever made. But it gets a little bit closer with the other categories. Next up is functionality, and this is an area where I think the watch does extremely well. Arguably, a smartwatch would have more functions available to it, and so on this particular metric, I guess there's technically room for improvement, but the more functions you add to a watch, the more cluttered things get. And for me, the time-telling functions that this watch has are the most useful ones. I especially appreciate the world time functionality of this watch. The lack of world time has always been my biggest complaint with the DW5600, the standard G-Shock Square. Not only does this watch include it, but it also implements it in a really great way, even allowing you to have your second time zone displayed in the upper right corner of the main time display. This is really one of the main features that makes me pick up this watch over every other watch in my collection. That combined with the fact that I know that it is always synced to the correct time and the correct daylight savings time, it's just so easy to use. I have a lot of watches that have GMT complications, and I love GMT complications, but half the time when I'm wearing them, I'm not 100% sure I set it correctly. I can't always remember if it's been adjusted for daylight savings time because I live in Japan where they don't do daylight savings time, and I always want to track time back home in California where they do. And this watch handles all of that perfectly. For me, this is the kind of functionality I need out of a watch, so it's perfect, but technically not best in the world because there are smartwatches that have greater levels of functionality. But this watch jumps ahead again in the next category, which is comfort and convenience. Comfort-wise, this is an extremely lightweight digital watch that you almost forget that you're wearing. It's a good size, it's very unobtrusive. I think it's great on that level. And in terms of convenience, we're getting back into the best in the world territory. This is a solar-powered watch that never needs to have a battery change. It's a watch that sets its own time automatically, syncing with atomic time every night. It's a watch that doesn't have a mechanical movement with moving parts that need to be serviced regularly. And optionally, if you want to connect it to your phone, it does give you an extra level of convenience in setting times and alarms. So in the comfort and convenience category, this is a tough watch to beat. I've euphemistically termed the last category accessibility, but really what I mean here is price. A watch is only good if you can actually get your hands on it. I got this watch here in Japan for roughly the equivalent of about $200. And for that price, I don't think you can find a watch that matches this one in terms of all of the other categories that we've just looked at. But it is still a watch that's going to price some people out, especially compared to how affordable you can get some of Casio's other watches, like the Casio Royale, which, while it doesn't quite match this G-Shock on a lot of the categories, it comes surprisingly close, and you can pick that one up for like $20 or $30. So whether or not this new G-Shock is actually the best watch that's ever been created, I think it is clearly a new benchmark for Casio. I think the fact that they've rolled out a watch with this number of features in that G-Shock Square format is a significant thing. They're giving you a world-class set of features at a price that is accessible to a large number of people. For me personally, I absolutely love this watch. And again, oddly enough, it's not primarily because of the display. The display is sort of a bonus here. I actually really like the feature set. I like that combination of both Bluetooth and Multiband 6. And I love the fact that it's able to display 2 time zones and give me that world time functionality. This is just the ultimate no hassle watch. You don't have to worry about anything. It sets itself, it charges itself, it can't be broken, it's comfortable on the wrist, and it offers every feature that I want out of a watch. But what do you guys think? I'd love to know if you guys think there is a better watch that meets the categories that I talked about in this video. What you think the ultimate practical wristwatch is? Drop me a comment down below. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you want to get this hoodie, along with a lot of other cool watch-themed designs, you can check out my website at justthewatch.com. That's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.